when the Germans captured a Soviet officer in 1941. At first they thought he was just another prisoner of war, but very soon everything changed. The man they had captured was not an ordinary soldier. He was Joseph Stalin's own son, Yakov Dzhugashvili. In an instant, this was no longer just a story of captivity. For the Nazis, it was a powerful propaganda opportunity. For the Soviets, it was a dangerous, humiliating, and almost impossible story to silence. But one question was now on everyone's mind. Would one of the most ruthless dictators in the world save his own son? Stalin was a man who decided the fate of millions. With one signature, he could move entire armies. With one order, he could save lives, or destroy them. But when it came to his own son, the answer he would give still horrifies people today. To understand that answer, we first have to understand Yakov's life, because this tragedy did not begin on the battlefield. Its roots went much deeper, back into Yakov's childhood and the cold shadow of his father. Yakov Dzhugashvili was born on March 18, 1907 in Baku. His mother, Kato Svanidze, died from typhus at a young age, when Yakov was only 8 months old. Her death shook Stalin deeply. But not long after, he left Baku and placed his son in the care of relatives in Georgia. For years, Yakov grew up in Tiflis. Far away from his father, he went to Georgian schools. He spoke Georgian and he remained completely separate from the harsh, frightening political world that Stalin was building in Moscow. When Yakov turned 14, he was called to Moscow. But the boy who arrived in the capital was quiet, shy, and spoke Russian with difficulty. He was a stranger to the cold and ambitious world of the Soviet elite, and that distance would only grow deeper between father and son. Stalin's coldness toward Yakov was known inside the family. The one person in the house who showed Yakov the most kindness was his stepmother, Nadezhda Alliluyeva. She tried to protect him from Stalin's harsh treatment, but Stalin showed little mercy toward his son. He often criticized Yakov's accent, his school performance, and his quiet nature. He believed Yakov was weak. After Nadezhda's suicide in 1932, Yakov became even more alone in the face of his father's cruelty. In truth, that coldness had already reached a frightening level years earlier. Around 1928, Yakov could no longer endure his father's endless psychological pressure. Inside the family apartment in the Kremlin, he shot himself in an attempt to take his own life. He was badly wounded, but he survived. At a moment like this, anyone would expect a father to be worried, but Stalin reacted, not with compassion but with mockery. According to accounts, he said to those around him with cruel sarcasm, "He cannot even shoot straight." After those words, the bond between father and son was almost completely broken. Yakov did not want to hide behind his father's name. He studied engineering. He married, and he tried to build for himself a quiet military life. But history would not give him a quiet life. On the morning of June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. That attack would go down in history as Operation Barbarossa. At the time, 33-year-old Yakov Dzhugashvili was serving in the Red Army as an artillery officer. If he had wanted, he could have used his father's name to move himself into a safer position. But Yakov did not do that. He went straight to the front, to the Vitebsk region, where the fighting was among the fiercest. Only 24 days after the war began, Yakov's unit was surrounded by German forces. On July 16, 1941, Yakov Dzhugashvili was captured by the Nazis. When the Germans discovered that he was Stalin's biological son, they saw it as a major opportunity. Despite intense interrogation, Yakov refused to reveal military secrets, but the Nazis used the exhausted, worn-out photographs of him in captivity. For propaganda, they printed thousands of leaflets and dropped them over Soviet positions. The message was simple but devastating. Even Stalin's son has surrendered. Why are you still fighting? This was no longer just the story of one prisoner. This was the moment when even Stalin's own family became part of the brutal game of war. So what did Stalin do when the news reached Moscow? His first reaction was cold and harsh. He should not have surrendered. Stalin saw his son's capture not as a tragedy, but as betrayal. After that, Yakov's wife, Yulia Meltzer, was arrested by the Soviet secret police. She was interrogated for a long time, but Stalin did not stop there. In August 1941, he signed the infamous Order Number 270. According to this order, Soviet soldiers who surrendered to the enemy were to be treated as traitors. And with his own signature, Stalin placed his own son in the position of a traitor. But the most shocking moment was still ahead. After the Battle of Stalingrad, the Germans offered the Soviet Union a prisoner exchange. They wanted to trade Yakov for the captured German field marshal, Friedrich Paulus. For Yakov, this may have been his last chance to survive. But Stalin's answer was ice cold. I will not trade a field marshal for a lieutenant. With that one sentence, Yakov's fate was almost sealed. To learn that his father saw him as a traitor, to know that his wife had been arrested, and to discover that the offer to save him had been rejected, all of this pushed Yakov into a deep psychological collapse. Some time later, he was sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Near Berlin there, the harsh isolation, the despair, and the realization that his father had completely abandoned him, pushed Yakov to his final limit. On the evening of April 14, 1943, Yakov left his barracks. He began walking toward the forbidden zone of the camp. The guards ordered him to stop, but Yakov did not stop. He walked directly toward the electrified barbed wire. A few seconds later, it was all over. 5-year-old Yakov Dzhugashvili died in Sachsenhausen camp. German records listed his death as suicide. When the news reached Moscow, Stalin showed no public grief. There was no official ceremony, no special tribute to his son's memory. Stalin lived for another 10 years, but he never once spoke. A sentence of regret about Yakov's tragic story remained in history as a heavy and painful question. How much can power change a human being? How far must a father go before he can abandon his own son like this? Maybe Yakov's story is not only about Stalin's son. It is about power, fear, and ideology, and how they can destroy even the simplest human feeling, even a father's mercy.